Okay, so maybe you've heard the origin story of how I started gardening and then came to be a market farmer, which led me to getting a degree in horticulture, which led me to doing this podcast. The short story is I had a really successful, very large garden, and I was sick of being stuck inside all the time working my day job, and I tried to find a way to make some side money from the garden, and the rest is history. Maybe you've been in the same position. A lot of gardeners do really, really well a couple of seasons in a row and then realize just how much they enjoy being in the garden and growing things. And they know that they could grow more. And then maybe they start daydreaming about setting up a little stand at the end of the driveway once a week, or going to the local farmer's market and setting up a table there, or even doing weekly garden boxes in a community supported agriculture or subscription style. None of those things are far fetched. And I've seen people just pop in once or twice a season at the smaller markets around town with a table full of nothing but the zucchini that has gone gangbusters in their garden, or the pumpkins that they grew way too many of. I've also seen gardeners take it one step further and increase the size of the garden and grow things specifically to take to the market every week. Unfortunately, I have also seen some of these same gardeners be extremely disappointed that they didn't sell out of that bounty of zucchini, or that they planned for so many offerings at the market, but almost none of that produced like they'd hoped, and they didn't really have much to sell. Would you believe me if I told you that selling the produce from your garden isn't the only way to make money from it? Today on Just Grow Something, we are talking 10 different ways that you can make money from your garden, and only a couple of them involve selling the actual fruits or vegetables. This is a very, very high level look at the options that you have so you can start thinking about what might actually fit into your lifestyle. Because let me tell you, after 17 seasons of selling every week at the farmer's market, I will tell you it is hard work, and there are definitely other options available to you. Let's dig in. Hey, I'm Karen. I started gardening in a small corner of my suburban backyard, and now 18 years later, I've got a degree in horticulture and operate a 40-acre market farm. I believe there is power in food and that everyone should know how to grow at least a little bit of their own. On this podcast, I share evidence-based techniques to help you plant, grow, harvest, and store all your family's favorites. Consider me your friend in the garden. So, grab your garden journal and a cup of coffee and get ready to just grow something. So, some of you know my story, some of you don't. You hear a little bit about it in the intro to this podcast, but basically, I started gardening behind a shed in a very small footprint of my suburban backyard. We were living in a duplex and did that for a couple of years before we moved to our 5-acre homestead. And that is where I really expanded the garden, first to a quarter acre, then to a half an acre. And I was running my own small business management company at the time out of my home. And I found myself sitting there, supposed to be working on client work, working on the computer, but my office window faced my garden. And I just sat there staring at the garden, wishing that I was out there instead of sitting at my desk. And that's what got me started thinking how I might be able to make a little bit of side money from the garden. Maybe I could at least pay for the seeds and the plants that we were using to grow our own stuff. So basically, that we would be kind of eating for free if I sold the extra. And that is when I came across the concept of a community supported agriculture program. And that was what we started with. And it was part time for 2 years. And then it turned into my full time gig. And about a year or two after that, it became my husband's full time gig as well. And so we've been selling to the public for about 17 seasons now. And for 15 of those seasons, it has been my full time job. And then, like I said, my husband joined me about a year and a half, 2 years later. And he was always working alongside me. It just wasn't his full-time income. So this is our livelihood at this point. What we have grown and what we have sold over the years has changed, and where and how we have sold those products has also changed. Initially, I was just growing what I knew how to grow well, right? What I had figured out. So I was pretty good at tomatoes and really good at squashes, cucumbers I was really good at. We did green beans, and then I tried to delve into some of the root vegetables, so more of the beets and the carrots, and then we moved into doing some strawberries. But we were also raising livestock at that time, and so we also were selling the eggs from our chickens, and we were selling the meat from beef and pork and chicken and turkey, and even goat for a very short period of time. And then I started to do more value added things as well. So I was making my own jams for the family. So I started selling jams, different jams and jellies at the market. I have done dried herbs and herb blends and tea blends over the years. We've done some farm merchandise, and we started by selling at the farmers market. We sold out our CSA shares. There were 15 families that signed up that first season, and they were supposed to pick up at the farmers market. And so the idea was they would come and pick up their box from us, and then we would bring whatever extra we harvested that week, and we would sell it at the farmers market at our stand. And as the CSA grew and our farmers market sales grew, we started to sell at more farmers markets. And at some point, half of my vehicle would be filled up with the CSA boxes, and that left me not as much room for the stuff that we would want to sell at the market. So we started going to more markets because we needed to sell more stuff, and there just wasn't enough room for it. And at some point, this kind of got out of control. Literally, we were selling at 6 different farmers markets throughout the week. One of us would be there Tuesday evening, one would be Wednesday morning, another one Wednesday evening, another one Thursday evening, and then we would be at 2 separate markets on Saturday mornings. It was just insane. And it honestly didn't leave us a whole lot of time to actually be out into the gardens. And so the gardens kind of started to become a total mess. And then I started to have less time to be able to do the jams and the jellies and be able to dehydrate the herbs. And so then we had to figure out, okay, well, something's got to give. And it just so happened that we added online orders for home delivery during the pandemic because we realized that our farmers markets weren't going to open on time, but we still had all this produce that we had already planted, and we still had to figure out a way to get our CSA shares to our customers. And so we started delivering. And so even after the pandemic ended and all of our farmers markets opened back up, we actually kept the delivery portion of it because all of our CSAs were now being delivered, which meant that we could fit more of our stuff into our vehicles, which meant that we could finally start to back off of the number of farmers markets we were attending every week. And that is sort of where we're sitting now. I actually don't sell jams and jellies anymore. I do still do some of the herbs and stuff. I've been drying them, but I haven't had time to do the blends or to package up the teas for probably the last 2 years. And so that's something that we're slowly looking at reintroducing. We don't sell eggs anymore. We don't sell anything other than pork, and this will actually be our last year selling the pork in terms of meat. And then we have added sales from the farm. So we're now open on Fridays, and we might consider opening up another day depending on how our sales are going. So, all of that to say, how you start selling doesn't have to be the way that you continue to sell. And what you start out selling doesn't have to continue to be what you sell. If you decide to jump into any one of these ventures, you don't have to decide that that's all you're going to sell. You don't have to decide that that's what you're going to sell from here on out. And where and how you sell it can change also. Are there things I would do differently when I started selling? Absolutely. Because I was growing, but mainly what I was planning on selling was what I was growing in the gardens. My garden planning should have been a heck of a lot different than what it was. I did not understand, fully how to get a continuous harvest out of those gardens of the things that people really wanted the most throughout the season. So succession planting, I had to learn all of that. I had to learn interplanting, and would have been able to get a lot more out of my existing spaces rather than continually trying to break new ground in order to be able to expand the gardens if I had learned how to interplant much earlier on. If I had learned companion planting earlier on, I would have had less problems with the insects and that sort of thing. So, in terms of garden planning, that was one of the major things. And it's kind of why I came up with, or how I came up with my Plan Like a Pro garden planning course, is because I took all of that information that I figured out in terms of learning how to grow for market, and I translated it into how people could use that for planning their own gardens, regardless of the size, because I've got it down to a sort of step by step. But it took me years to figure that out. The other thing I wish I'd done was to scope out the markets that we were going to sell at much better than what we did. We quite literally signed up for these markets without actually having ever attended them. I have no idea what we were thinking. And I should say, not we, me. This was all my doing. My husband had nothing to do with any of the planning of this. He just said, yes, dear, and kind of followed along, bless his heart. So I should have done more scoping out of the markets. So these things that we sort of learned as we went along in selling at the markets and now selling online and now doing online deliveries and stuff, I'm sort of looking at maybe creating another series or a workshop series, or even, my husband and I have talked about maybe doing a completely separate podcast talking about how to sell and set up at farmers markets. So as you listen to this episode, as we go through all these different ideas, if that is something that you are interested in learning about, send me a message, please, or comment in this episode. Send me a DM on social, or email me something. Let me know if this is something that would interest you. A full series on start to finish. How do you get into farmers markets? What are the things that you have to think about? What are the setups that you have to worry about? And all of these different things that go into it. Like I said, today's episode is really just going to be a very high level sort of overview of the different ideas of what you can do to generate some income. But I think folks would really benefit from a sort of in-depth look at what it takes to sell at a farmer's market. So if that's something that interests you, please reach out and let me know. And let me know what questions you might have too, because that might give us an idea of what we might want to talk about. So, without further ado, here are 10 ideas for how to generate some income from gardening, and not all of them actually have to do with selling your garden produce. Now, the first one does, okay? Selling your produce. That is number one. And there are multiple ways that you could do this. The first one, and the simplest way to start this, would be to do a roadside or driveway stand. So if you're rural, you live in a rural area, especially if you live like on a gravel or a dirt road and you have a long driveway, this just might be something at the end of your drive, sort of along the roadside. If you are suburban, it might be at the edge of your driveway, along the sidewalk, or at the top of the drive, so people could just kind of walk up. Kind of think of this like an adult lemonade stand, right? Except instead of selling lemonade, you are selling the produce, the extra stuff that is coming out of your gardens. Now, of course, if you have a homeowners association, you need to know those rules. If you have city codes that require a permit for this, you need to know that too. These are things that you have to look up. But barring all of that, you can just start with a simple table setup, maybe a pop-up canopy if it's sunny out, and some baskets for your produce. And that's pretty much it. You get to decide whether or not you're going to actually man the stand, if you're just going to pop it up out there one day a week and let people know that you're there and sit there and sell for a few hours. Or you could set it up sort of like an honor system. I mean, think of the little free libraries that are set up at the end of people's driveways. You could do something very similar to that. You just have to have a way to sort of lock up the money, or you just say, hey, you got to Venmo me or whatever. There are a lot of options for this depending on where you live. And you can be as simple or as fancy with your setups as you want. I will guarantee you, if you go onto Pinterest and you just look for, home produce stand or pop-up stand or whatever, I will guarantee that you will find a bunch of different options for people who have made really cutesy, fancy little things. And then, or just pictures of, very simple setups with just a table and a pop-up canopy, or even just a market umbrella of some sort, right? So that's just your little own setup right there in front of your house. The next step beyond that would be a farmer's market, actually setting up a stall at the farmer's market to sell your stuff directly to consumers. I think the first thing that you need to think about when considering this is understanding the market that you are looking at, right? And I say your market, and I mean that in two different ways. One being the actual farmer's market itself, What is the setup? What are the days that they sell? What are the hours? What are the requirements for that specific market in terms of what you need to bring in your setup, the tables, if you need a canopy, if you need weights, and all of those types of things. But also understanding the market that is there in terms of the customers. What do they want? What is lacking at that market that you might be able to provide? Those are the things you kind of want to learn. So if you could go to the farmer's market a couple of times throughout the season, understand what the volume of traffic is like, and see the volume of what the other vendors are bringing so that you have an idea of whether or not you will be able to match that volume. Don't be like me and just assume that you're going to pop up your table at the farmer's market and you're going to sell your extra and then sell out of your extra within the first 30 minutes of the market and have to stand there and twiddle your thumbs for the next 4.5 hours as people walk by an empty table because you did not do your homework. So understand your market before you go and talk to the customers, talk to the vendors, not while they're busy, but if they have a chance, at the end of their day or during a break, find out, what the crowd is like, talk to the customers and find out what they would like to see more of. You might find that there is a niche there that you could actually fill, that you might be very good at. There might be plenty of tomatoes and cucumbers and such at that market, but maybe there's a lack of fresh herbs, and you grow fantastic basil and dill and cilantro, and people would go nuts for that. Maybe there's plenty of fresh leafy greens, but there's no microgreens. So that's what I mean by understand your market. Look at your local market and where you would be. Figure out whether or not you'd be able to provide the volume that was necessary for that market. Some of them are very small, and one little table with 20 pounds of produce is going to be enough. Others, that's not going to cut it. So understand that. And then still know the things before you go, like what the setup requirements are. Does the market require you to have insurance? What type of packaging are you supposed to have or allowed to have? That sort of thing. So there's a lot of nuances that go into that, but just understanding the market from a customer perspective is a place to start. The other option here is to do a community supported agriculture program or a subscription box. And I use those two terms separately, even though sometimes you might hear them used interchangeably. For me, a traditional CSA is where customers pay upfront for a share of your garden's produce throughout the season. And you decide how many weeks that lasts, and you decide how much they pay for it upfront, and you go from there. The subscription box is a little different. They would pay weekly for a box of the harvest, and they're not necessarily locked in. They can choose whether they want to buy that week or not. You can choose how you want to do either one of these, if they get to choose what goes in the box or if you get to decide what goes in the box. What it comes down to is planning for this is absolutely key. Again, understanding those succession plantings, because that is essential for a consistent harvest. Once you are obligating yourself to giving somebody produce every, week for a certain number of weeks, the pressure really is on for you to make sure that that harvest is successful and that you have a wide variety of things to put into that box. One of the biggest complaints that I used to hear from people who joined a CSA was that there was no variety, because the farm that they were working with was really good at growing leafy greens, and they would get boxes and boxes of leafy greens in the beginning part of the season, all kinds of greens, but then there wouldn't be much else. And, there might be some radishes, or there might be some turnips, there might be something, but there was all kinds of things that, it was just too much in the way of one thing. So having an idea of how to provide for some variety is also something that's important there. And then understanding how you will distribute those boxes. So are you going to have people come pick up at your home where you garden? Or if you garden in a community garden, is it, are they going to come pick up there? Are you going to do a combination like we did, where you set up a farm stand or you set up a farmer's market stand and have people come and pick that up at the same time that you are selling? So these are things to just sort of think through before you make the decision that this is one of those things that you want to do. So yes, selling your produce is absolutely probably the number one way to make some income from your garden, whether it's a roadside stand or at a farmer's market or through a CSA program. But those are not the only way is to be able to make a little bit of side money. The second way to sort of start a garden side hustle is one that we already talked about that I have done, which is to sell value added products. So things like jams and jellies, dried herbs and teas, baked goods. If you are utilizing your garden produce in baked goods, whether that's zucchini bread or pumpkin bread, pumpkin pies, or you're making focaccias that have fresh herbs in them, whatever it is. If there is something that you can create from your garden, that is a value added product. You're not necessarily selling the produce itself, you're selling these other things. And if you're good at that, hey, you know how to create some really stellar tea blends or seasoning blends, or you make some really great sachets out of the lavender that you grow in your garden, or you make this killer strawberry jam, whatever it is, you once again have to decide where and how you will sell that. So are you going to sell it directly from the house, from a stand? Are you going to do a listing on Facebook Marketplace and have people come and pick it up from your home? Are you willing to deliver it? Do you want to go to the farmer's market? Are you in an area where some of these things could be sold out of somebody else's shop? These are things that you have to understand, because different municipalities all have different rules about what you can and cannot resell. So if you are doing something in your home, that is typically referred to as a cottage industry. So you are participating in a cottage industry, meaning, out of the home, you're not working in a licensed facility. Therefore, in most areas, you cannot give your product to somebody else to sell on your behalf. So you can't make that in your own home and then have somebody put it in their store to resell, even on a consignment basis. This usually applies to everything from baked goods to your jams and jellies, and your dried herbs and teas. So 90% probably of the places where you're going to sell, you're going to have to do it direct to consumer. So that's going to either mean doing pickups from your house or delivery, or doing it at a farmer's market, or popping up that little lemonade stand out in front of your house and selling your jams and jellies that way. The third way that you can make a little money from the garden would be through plant sales. So if you have gotten really good at starting your own seeds for transplants for your garden, you can grow extra in the spring, and you can do that again in the late summer for a fall garden. You can maybe educate people on, hey, this is when it's time to plant the fall garden. So if you can start extras and you can sell those in the spring and again in the fall, that's a couple of times a year where you can sell a bunch of stuff off, and then maybe you're not selling throughout the middle of the summertime. In some areas, you can also divide and propagate like your perennial plants and offer those for sale, or your perennial herbs and offer those for sale. In some places, you do need a nursery license in order to be able to do that. In Missouri, you have to be licensed in order to be able to propagate perennials that are coming out of the ground, because they want to be able to inspect and make sure that you're not passing on any soil-borne pathogens or anything like that into somebody else's garden. Not every place requires this. So look up the rules in your municipality and figure out what you are and are not allowed to sell. Right alongside this, you could be selling the seeds too. Again, if this is something that you've done before, you've done seed staving, you understand how to isolate those varieties and sell those seeds. Check to see whether or not you're required to have some sort of a license in your state and what it requires, what's required to get that. I used to do that years ago. That was something else we used to offer, was seeds. Yes, I needed a license to do it. It was super easy for me to get that, and it was no big deal. It was just certain information that you had to include on the packaging when you sold it. But once again, with plant sales or seed sales, you do need to know, where are you going to sell these from? So are you going to do it from home? Are you going to take it to a market? Can you sell them to a local garden center and have them resell them on your behalf? Is that something that is allowed in your area? Do you need a nursery license in order to be able to do that if they are just annuals? And a lot of places, the answer is no. You don't have to have an inspected nursery to do that. You can start and propagate your own annual vegetable seeds or seedlings and be able to have a local garden seller sell them on your behalf, whether that's on consignment or you sell them to them outright and they sell it to their customers. So you have a few different options there, but plant sales are a really good way to make some money from your garden, especially if you are really good at starting your own seeds and your own transplants. The next side hustle you might consider would be cut flowers and floral arrangements. If you grow fabulous flowers and you know how to put those together as good looking fresh floral bouquets, they sell like hotcakes. I can tell you at the farmer's market. Our flower growers always have a line of people wanting to buy their flowers. You also have the option at that point to maybe sell them to local florists. If you do a really good job at the things that they like to put in their displays, then you can actually approach them and say, "Hey, this is what I'm growing this season. Would you be interested in buying?" Now, if you're going to do it that way, you really ought to approach them the season before and give them an idea of what it is that you actually grow and see if they would be interested, and set your kind of situation up ahead of time so that you're not increasing what you're growing, hoping to sell them to local florists, and then, not being able to connect with any of them and having too many flowers. But you could just go ahead and do those bouquets and sell them at the farmer's market. You could also offer weekly or biweekly or monthly flower subscriptions to local customers. A subscription doesn't necessarily have to be for produce. You could do that with flowers if you're really good at that. That is not something that I am good at. I can grow my own cut flowers for in my kitchen, but I do not know how to arrange them properly. And it's not something that I am really good at, making these, tall plants stand up, and I just leave that to the experts. But I have been known to buy flowers from my other vendors at the farmers market. So again, where are you going to sell these? If you decide to do bouquets and you want to sell them already pre-made, are you going to do it at the farmers market? Are you going to set up a little pop-up stand at the end of your driveway? You're going to list them on Facebook Marketplace, whatever it is. Just know what your outlet is going to be. And cut flowers and floral arrangements are absolutely something that you could do to make money from your garden. One that you might not think of would be to give garden tours or give little workshops. If you have a really unique garden layout or just a stellar setup, that's very, pleasing to look at, people will pay you to come and get a guided tour of not just what it is that you're growing, but how you're growing it, or how you have it laid out, or what your trellis system is. You can hook up with a local growers group or university extension services programs that offer tours if you really have something special to offer. It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. You can also host workshops on different gardening techniques or pest management or composting or plant care, whatever it is that you are really good at. Think about when you're talking to your friends who also happen to be gardeners or who have maybe an interest in gardening. What questions are they asking you that you are always able to answer? Whatever that is, it must be something that you're good at, because you're giving them the answers. They're looking for knowledge. You have it. That is something that you could host a workshop on. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in your garden or at your home. You could do something like that at the local library or at the community center. There are different ways that you can get into doing, either tours of your garden or giving workshops and teaching other people how it is that you do your gardens, because every technique is different and every gardening area is different. And you have something to offer if you have been successful at even one thing in your garden. What kind of goes along with this, but in a much different manner, is number 6, and that is online content and products. This is a bit more difficult, and I'm actually speaking from experience here, because this goes into a lot of what I do, which is either blogging or vlogging or online courses, ebooks, guides, podcasts, that sort of thing. Sharing your gardening tips, your techniques through either a written blog or a YouTube video blog, or doing it on social media or a podcast is absolutely viable. But trying to make money from it is a bit more difficult than just sort of doing one-on-one in-person classes, because the way that you monetize those things, the blogging and the vlogging, is through ads or through sponsorships or through affiliate marketing. And it is definitely a sort of slow burn. Now, if you're just doing it because you enjoy it and you love doing that, which is kind of what I did when I first started the podcast, it was just in order to share the information with people and teach people how to garden. And the monetization of it sort of started to come later. Then okay, great. You don't have any expectations at that point. But if you really are expecting to make some side money by doing this, it takes a very concerted effort to start doing ads and find sponsorships and find products that you can be an affiliate for. And it doesn't happen quickly. It has to be something that you are very consistent about and something that you can be very patient with. Online courses, that's a whole different story. I mean, if you can develop an online course or a webinar or something on various gardening topics that you are really well versed in, I mean, you can throw them out there and, who knows how many people are actually going to sign up for it. Does it take some effort to be able to like actually develop those courses? Absolutely. It took me forever to put together my very first one, the Plan Like a Pro one. And I've been working on several others of them over the past year, and it takes time. Your situation is going to dictate how much time you can spend on these things. And then you have to spend time marketing these things and getting people to lay eyes on them and decide that this is something that is for them. Same thing goes if you are writing ebooks or other types of online guides. Everybody is looking for information in one way or another about their gardening, right? And you constantly have people looking for, doing Google searches or doing online searches for very specific topics. If you can find out what those topics are, you can write and sell ebooks that are about those specific topics. But again, there's marketing that goes along with that. And there's a lot of time in actually writing and researching, making sure that you are actually passing on not just your own knowledge, but also the correct knowledge to other people, because you don't want to be, giving people bum scoop, basically. It takes a lot of focus to do these types of things. And they are things that I am constantly working on in the background of my business. Because Just Grow Something is a side hustle to my farm that, the farm started as a side hustle to my garden, but then became my full-time job. The farm comes first, then this podcast and my consulting clients. And then I get to create the other content like the ebooks and the online courses that are always in the works. If it sounds like a lot, it is. And it's why I'm really loving this 7-day challenge from Magic Mind, because it's gotten me into the calm focus that I need to accomplish even more in my day, because, my day wasn't busy enough as it was. I just got back from a trip to visit family last weekend. I didn't bring any Magic Mind with me because I was traveling light, like one backpack on the plane light. And I was actively trying not to work while I was there. When I got back, I went about my first day back to working, and I realized about halfway through my day, as I was trying to focus on writing podcast episode notes and doing the previous week's bookkeeping for the farm, that I just wasn't keeping my focus. I was all over the place. It was only when I went to make an iced coffee to wake myself up that I remembered I hadn't taken my Magic Mind with my coffee that morning. It's really amazing the difference it's making in my productivity and how I actually notice now how my focus tends to wane in the afternoons when I'm not taking it. It works so much better alongside my coffee in the morning for just sustained energy and focus than me grabbing a coffee in the afternoons. Now, if I grab a coffee just because I love my coffee, that's a totally different story. You can try Magic Mind and get your own productivity boost by going to magicmind.com/justgrowsomething and using code justgrowsomething20 at checkout to save big on a new subscription or 20% on a one-time purchase. I am all about this stuff. It's my little green happy productivity shot. magicmind.com/justgrowsomething with code justgrowsomething20 at checkout to get yours. Speaking of subscriptions, that is number 7 on our list of things that you can do as a side hustle in the garden. Subscription boxes. And I'm not talking subscription boxes like we talked about with like the CSA program where it's all produce. think of things like garden kits, right? Things that you're putting together with seeds or tools or instructions for specific garden projects that you have successfully done in your own garden, or kits with everything someone would need to grow their own herb garden, or a specific tea blend, or a salad box, specific salad greens, things like that that make life easier for somebody who is trying to do something new always go over really, really well. And you could just do this, start locally, either listing them on Facebook Marketplace. You could do them at a farmer's market stand. You could sell these at like craft shows or holiday markets. And these types of things you actually could sell to local shops or sell them on consignment in local shops. You can test the waters. You can see how well they go. You can try different packaging options and different, combinations of things to see what really works. First of all, what you love to put together, because none of these things are going to work if you don't enjoy actually doing it, right? So, if you're really good at making fairy gardens, right? Or if you're really good at, making little gnome homes or whatever, you can sell those kits to teach people how to do that. You can just start locally and test it out. And then if you get really good, or if you get good feedback, or it seems to be doing well, you could actually expand to online sales that you could ship. These are things that are easy enough to ship if you have the right packaging. So you can either do it through Etsy, or you could create your own online shop on your own website. So these types of things are really popular, and they're really fun for people when they have an interest in something, but they either don't know where to start, or they're just looking for something that's new and fun and fresh, or a little bit of a surprise. If it's something that's different every single month and they get it automatically, number one, that's automatic money in your pocket every month. That is a nice little side hustle. And it's a surprise for them they get to open. If you've ever had one of these subscriptions, it actually is kind of fun. So that's another really good way to kind of start a garden side hustle, is with subscription boxes of different like kits. Now, if we go back to selling the actual produce, one other option that you have is to focus on specialty crops. So maybe this is something where you can develop a niche market for a very specific type of produce. So maybe it's heirloom varieties. Maybe you specialize in growing and selling the really unique or heirloom varieties of the fruits and vegetables that are common in your area. Maybe it's microgreens. Those have a really high market value. They can be grown year round. And maybe you're at a market where there's lots and lots of other types of produce, but maybe microgreens aren't there. And these are something that maybe you could also, sell locally to either the local grocery store, because it's technically like a plant. It's not necessarily produce. It can be sold at the grocery store, but could also be sold in other markets as well. Maybe you're really good at medicinal plants, either medicinal herbs or other plants that are used and have medicinal properties. Maybe you can grow and sell the plants, or you can sell the harvest from the plants. Now, be careful on this one with your wording, though. Don't get in trouble by claiming the plants or a harvest from a plant will specifically do X, Y, and Z. The FDA is very specific about what we can say that plants do or don't do definitively. And, so usually you should say what they may do. And I'm using bunny ears. This may help you with X, Y, and Z is usually what you have to say. But if you are into the medicinal plants and you grow them very well, you might be able to, create a niche market for yourself in terms of medicinals. Number 9 would be to sell gardening services. So, are you really good at garden planning? Are you really good at garden design as a service to other homeowners? Can you lay out a garden space really, really well and make good utilization of it? Or are you really good at kind of conceptually creating these things that just look absolutely beautiful? This is part of what I do with my garden consulting services. Most of what I do is the actual garden planning, but I do help with design services when needed. The other thing that you might be interested in doing is helping with installation and maintenance. If you've got somebody that, okay, yeah, I have this idea and I want these raised planters over here, but I need this also tilled up, et cetera, et cetera. Is that a service that you can offer? Do you like getting your hands in there and actually kind of doing the creating of the new space? This is not something that I offer with my Just Grow Something garden consulting, but I know plenty of people out there who do this as sort of a side hustle. I will come till your garden for you, or I will come put your raised beds together for you, or I will, mix your potting mix together for you and install it in those raised beds. So, gardening services, whether it's in terms of design or installation and maintenance, can be a way to make some money from your own gardening knowledge. And then if you're really adventurous, the last one would be to rent your garden space. So if you have a really beautiful garden area and you have an outdoor gazebo that is in there, could you rent it out? Is there a local photographer who would love to take sessions for people in your garden? Can you rent it out for like tea parties or something? Or if it's really big, a family reunion or something, do you want to get into like event hosting? Or could you rent an area of your garden out to people who want to garden, but they don't have a space of their own? Community gardens in my area are really few and far between. And a lot of the time, those community gardens are actually run by the Master Gardeners program, and they do it to raise produce for donation. There are some areas that I pass by once I get further up into the city where there are definitely community gardens, but a lot of those gardens plots are always taken up. And it seems like there is always a need out there for an allotment or for a garden plot to be rented. So is that something that you would be able to do? Do you have an area where you could actually rent out a space to people who really want to garden, but they lack a space to be able to do it on their own or at their own home? So, with all of these, I think there are some overarching themes or ideas behind them, right? Number one would be understanding your market. Know what products or services are in demand in your area, or if you plan on going online and doing online sales or online courses, is there a demand out there for what it is that you are trying to offer? When it comes to what you're physically selling, I think quality over quantity is probably, a really big balancing point. Sometimes when it comes to farmers markets, yes, you feel like you need to have a lot of stuff in order to be able to offer it. But if that stuff isn't really good quality, it's not going to matter because nobody's going to want it. So, quality over quantity, definitely, but then also focusing on, being able to meet the market demand. And then marketing goes along with every single one of these. You're going to have to somehow either use social media or local advertising or word of mouth or whatever it is to promote whatever business it is that you start on the side to, gain some money from your garden. And then anytime you can diversify, if you could take two of these ideas and combine them, offer a variety of products and services, whatever it is, just to kind of, reduce the risk and increase the reward in terms of revenue stream. I always say, diversifying is absolutely necessary because if one thing doesn't sell, at least you have something as a backup. That's it. 10 different ideas for making money from your garden, and they don't all involve selling the actual produce itself. Yes, that can be part of it, but value added products are always in demand. And putting kits or boxes and things together for people that they can't or don't know how to do themselves almost always has a market. And teaching people to do those things for themselves, yeah, that's my jam. That's why you're here listening to me, right? If I can take my experiences and education and teach people how to do it themselves, well, so can you. You don't have to have a degree in agriculture or 20 years of gardening experience. You just have to have more experience and education than the folks that you're teaching. So if you've successfully started seedlings for transplant into your own garden for years, teach that. If you have a fantastic herb garden every year and you know 1,000 ways to use them, teach that. Whether it's in a conference or it's in an ebook or it's an online course, whatever it is, start small share the knowledge, share the joy, and maybe you can make a little money from the garden too. Until next time, my gardening friends, keep on cultivating that dream garden, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Just Grow Something podcast. For more information about today's topic and to find all the ways you can get in touch with me or support the show, go to justgrowsomethingpodcast.com. Until next time, my gardening friends, keep learning and keep growing.